I'm coming to conclusions, and the conclusions concern now our role. What can we do with this? How do we utilize that kind of analysis? What is its value? And starting into that last chapter, I would like to come back to a slide that you've already seen at the very start. I would like to come back to it now that we've seen those examples. We started out with the idea that we use the business model approach to help developing improved business models in cooperation with enterprises for the replication of improved small-scale business models. I think this is what we've seen in two examples, basically. It's about an improved business model, and especially in the case of the Atieke, a mechanical miller, a replication in Burkina Faso. In the case of the rice, it's not so much a replication of the industrial mill, it's a replication of a farming technology. There are also these two other points which we have not seen in the case studies, but which I would even think are maybe more important than the first two, because of the difficulty that, as you've seen in the case of the rice miller, it is not necessarily our task to establish the business model for the big rice mill. After all, there is a private investor, and he should know, or she should know, and she has, or he has the numbers also. So definitely we can just say we help maybe developing improved business models, but it depends very large on that partnership. And we should not do, and we cannot do in many cases, the job of those enterprises. That is something we have to keep in mind. But of course, from the perspective of a development agency such as GIZ, what is important is that we verify the value chain solutions that we support all along, be it financing, services, or whatever it is, that we have an understanding of the economics involved. So I would think that the third point, for which I don't have an example in this presentation, is still a very important utilization of that kind of know-how. Now, having said that, let me still talk about the two first bullet points, developing or helping developing improved business models and replication. These are the questions I think we should ask in innovating and replicating business models. Does the business model provide social benefits? And I now think we should also include the environmental benefits, which are left out here, like income of poor self-employed entrepreneurs. This is for the micro enterprises, the jobs created, and also the type of jobs created, economic opportunities created for other small-scale entrepreneurs upstream or downstream. These effects that are very much related to the value chain, by which you're not only looking at that particular thing, but you also look at the connections, the service providers like the mechanic who's doing the maintenance of the mill, for example, include that also as an economic opportunity and as a type of job creation. And then the availability of cheap food. If we achieve a lower cost, we can also reduce prices. I think that kind of social analysis, and let's add also the environmental analysis, is necessary for us to know whether or not we are in fact doing anything about it. Because normally, and that should be really the regular case, entrepreneurs are responsible for their own business, and it's not our task to do their job of managing the enterprises. It's really only if there is some social benefit that comes out of the evolution of the business model. And then, of course, if you have come up with such an idea, can it be replicated? How many enterprises can adopt that business model in view of limitations of market demand is a very important issue. And we have to look at the market first before we invest. But even if it may not be replicable in large numbers, two more considerations strategic considerations may apply. One is it a stepping stone for subsequent innovations? Maybe we do something now that introduces some type of technology and leads enterprises to further investment. Then you could say, even if it can't be replicated too much, but it can lead to a second step, and can maybe, that would be the third question here, become the basis for developing other business models. We've seen that in the ATK, I repeat myself, by introducing the service milling concept, of course, it is also a possibility for others to evolve. So I think these are the considerations that we have to make from a public point of view, public investment point of view, and development policy point of view. How would we do that? Promoting, now this is the question, what can we do about this? Basically do two things that projects get involved in: generating new business ideas based on an understanding of the position of the enterprise in the value chain and the whole system. We would, as part of our support strategy for value chain development, be able to introduce ideas. And then, of course, if we have to do with very small enterprises, SMEs, micro enterprises, we have to see to it that the technological change and that the business model change comes in steps that are feasible for those micro enterprises. Not all of those innovations are innovations that have to be created in the place. I think in most cases, as we've again seen in the ATK case, the technology and even the business model as a whole can be taken over from others, copied from other places. And then we are talking about business cases. So developing a business case together with partners would be another role that we can take. I should say in both cases here we are really assisting, we are facilitating this. We are not doing it on behalf of operators or enterprises, but together with these partners come up with business cases that can communicate the idea to the financial partners so as to, in fact, raise the funds and get the funding secured. And there are a few bullet points that talk about the elements of a business case, but I'm not going deeper into this. I think you all know this, and you also have worked on entrepreneurship development. I don't want to get more into this. If there is interest, of course, building on this seminar today, we could also look in a later stage on entrepreneurship development as an intervention that GIZ very often is engaged in. Brings me to the last slide of that presentation. And I said already that something would be coming at the end, talking about the limitations of the methodology, of that tool, of that approach, the conditions, limits, and risks using the business model concept and methods. And there are 4 points that I would like to draw your attention on, and maybe you think we can discuss that a little bit. One is business model development and financial analysis are always prone to error. Simon, who is with us here in the room, I think you can also say how much changes if you really look into the business model. You change a certain parameter and the whole system changes. And if you don't get that right, the conclusions and results may differ widely with the respective consequences. So we have to be careful with those analyses and not jump too quickly and not think that easy solutions can be found by just moving around and manipulating some of the figures. In the end, it is the entrepreneurs themselves who have to know their figures. We can help them to know them, but it is those entrepreneurs who have to take the decision to invest and also take over the risk, not us. So here is a word of warning that we should not be too overconfident in our understanding of those systems. Then the other point that has already been mentioned, I think this was one of the questions, where do the data come from? And now let me say we as GIZ are rather outsiders in the business world and do not have necessarily access to the requisite data. If you want to be on the safe side in these calculations, they should be based on empirical findings. And of course, that needs partnerships. Unless enterprises and companies are interested in the collaboration with development agencies and that trusting partnership is created as we work, we cannot go for business model improvement. I would even pronounce it that clearly that unless we are in a partnership mode, it will be very difficult. Then there is a third point, and it is a colleague of mine who has really very strongly pointed to this, Alphonse, who is also doing many trainings in value chain work. He said, be sure you're not spreading business secrets. And it's not always small scale farmers, yeah. The technology, whose technology is common sense and everybody knows it, they don't have a secret there. But if you work in other businesses, in other value chains, say handicrafts, it is a unique selling point. It is the basis for competitiveness of small enterprises that they have something special. So there are limits to replicating ideas that people need to succeed in the market. So here is an ethical issue, and there is an issue of fairness, and also a very pragmatic point that we should not move into spreading ideas and business models from the perspective of a public agency that wants to get that spread out, but at the same time, maybe damaging a trust relationship with those, now I say, handicraft producers that trust in us that we would help them. So here is a critical point to look into. Proprietary knowledge and the necessary confidence that needs to be maintained. And then finally, and I think this is a point, a critical point we already mentioned, there are limits to replicating interesting business models because of the limited market demand and decreasing product prices in end markets. And that is a story that everyone who has worked in agriculture can tell. As soon as we invest in better technology and the volumes go up, prices will react. And you may risk a treadmill by which you are investing, and the only thing you achieve from the perspective of farmers is that prices go down and you are never becoming more profitable because you don't make enough to, or you cannot reduce costs quickly enough to really make more profit as prices, end prices, sales prices go down. So here are a number of critical points, and I think it's also worthwhile discussing this. And with this, I will conclude. My last slide is exactly this. I thank you for your attention.